Okay. Welcome everyone to Thursday, August 18th, 2022 Police Services Board meeting number 2211. This time I'm going to hand it over to Chief Angie McNeely. She can introduce the people doing the presentation today.
Sounds good. Thanks so much. And so today I'd like to introduce to you two veteran officers with the Kingston Police in the field of internet child exploitation. So Detective Constable Paul Robb has been with the Kingston Police since April of 2018, but prior to that, he was with the Toronto Police Service for 17 years. So we've got a total of 21 years of experience. And in Toronto, he was an experienced and accomplished investigator within the child exploitation unit for about 6 years. And then when he came to Kingston in 2019, he returned to this area of specialization, which is near and dear to his heart. So we're glad to have him here. We've got Detective Constable Derek Frawley as well, and he's a 23-year member with the Kingston Police who's had 4 years of policing experience with Peterborough prior to that. And his experience in the Criminal Investigations Division began with his deployment in e-crimes in 2013, and he was seconded to the provincial internet child exploitation strategy in 2014 and has been there ever since. He's been recognized for his tenacity and his abilities in developing technology tools to support investigations in these internet-based crimes against children. So without any further, we welcome you both, Paul and Derek.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief. Good afternoon, everybody. We have a brief presentation, a little PowerPoint we'd like to take you through and just basically talk to you today about what the internet child exploitation is and what it is we do here in Kingston and of course throughout Ontario and the country itself. So I'm just going to try and share my screen here. Did that work okay? As everyone can see that all right?
Yeah.
Great. So we're Derek and I and another officer who's not here today. We make up what's called the Internet Child Exploitation Unit here at the Kingston Police, part of the Criminal Investigation Division. And today we'll sort of talk to you a little bit about what we do here, and we use the acronym ICE. Here in the ICE unit, we'll talk about the offenses we investigate and talk a little bit about statistics with this particular type of offending. So it's our job in this unit to investigate instances of child pornography. So that's all types of offending involving child pornography, making it, sharing it, it being uploaded to all kinds of different websites and things like that. We also investigate offenses related to child luring. This is the Dateline to catch a predator type stuff. So people who engage youth online, talk to children on social media and gaming platforms, a variety of platforms, talk to kids and try and get them to commit sexual offenses. So they try and make arrangements to meet children as well as try to get children to make child abuse material and send it to them, and ultimately they end up sharing it across the internet. We also investigate instances of peer exploitation. So these are instances where you have kids who take images of themselves and share them with other kids, boyfriends, girlfriends, classmates, things that go on throughout the schools. We also work with our partners across the province, the country, and really the world to identify child victims of child pornography. We participate in a victim identification program that's ultimately run by the RCMP, where we try and identify children in images and videos, and we share that information across the globe, really, so that we can track these series of media and do our best to put a stop to it, or at least identify the people sharing it. And then a large part of what we do is we work with our strategy partners. And here in Ontario, we're part of the provincial strategy to protect children from sexual abuse and exploitation on the internet. It's coordinated by the Ontario Provincial Police. It encompasses about 28 other police services here in Ontario. And we really work together to combat this problem. As you can see, we've got a lot of stakeholders and partners in this area in particular. We here in Kingston, we do a lot of work with the Durham Regional Police, Belleville Police, Peel, Toronto, OPP. On a regular basis, we're always in contact with each other and sharing information and working together. We also work with not-for-profit organizations like Boost and the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. They're a big partner of ours. They have a great program that helps provide a lot of services for youth who've unfortunately become victims of child exploitation, as well as they run projects that helps with victim identification. And they also have a great program that we utilize quite often now, where they have victim impact statements from children that have unfortunately been abused or been victims of child exploitation. The Canadian Centre for Child Protection, they've obtained statements from these child victims that we use in times of sentencing for our offenders, so that the courts really get a good picture of how this type of offending impacts our most vulnerable citizens. So ICE investigations, they kind of fall into two categories really. Proactive, so that's undercover online investigations. So that's where we have officers trained in this area who will either pose as children or pose as offenders, and they'll engage offenders online and try and identify them and ultimately arrest them. And we also do a bit of monitoring of some file sharing networks, things peer-to-peer, what we call peer-to-peer, where suspects are sharing child pornography. And then we have our reactive investigations, which really takes up about the majority of our work, right. Which is citizens' complaints. So that's stuff where people have called the Kingston Police to report an instance of child exploitation. Reports from cybertip.ca. Cybertip.ca is it's a not-for-profit, again, ran through the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, where people can anonymously make reports online, seek help for child exploitation issues. And then we get probably about 50% of our reports come from the National Child Exploitation Coordination Center. This is a division of the RCMP that is basically a kind of a clearinghouse. So all reports from all your electronic service providers, so Google, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, they'll send reports of people they've observed on their networks that are committing child exploitation related offenses. They'll send those reports to the NCECC. The NCECC will determine which police department has jurisdiction over where either the offender or the victim is. And then we'll send those reports out to law enforcement to be investigated. And then, of course, we get direct reports from other law enforcement agencies. So not only across the province, but we've received reports from New Zealand, from the UK, France, Italy, all over, where we try and help them investigate instances where we either they've identified a victim here, or they've identified a suspect here offending against a child abroad. So what is child pornography? We use the criminal code, Canadian Criminal Code definition of child pornography in order to define what it is. And this really is how we frame our investigations. And the reality is people often have calling it child pornography is kind of it's an outdated term. It certainly doesn't really encompass, it doesn't do a good job of actually describing what this kind of stuff is. When you read the criminal code definition is quite, it's quite specific, and it's very easy to, it certainly provides a very clear answer as to what it is. But I think people often have in their head, when they hear stories about people being arrested for child pornography, I think they tend to think about an image of a child nude and just on a couch or in someone's room or something like that. Whereas the reality that we're seeing is that more often than not, it's the first part of that definition there, where we're seeing people who are under 18, and specifically we're seeing children, we're seeing people who are under the age of like 12, who are engaged in explicit sexuality, where it's child sexual abuse material is probably the best way to describe child pornography. It's not commercially made pornographic material. It is more often than not, it's evidence of an image or a video that's capturing sexual abuse of children. So the Canadian Criminal Code, thankfully here in Canada, we're very fortunate that our definition of child pornography is very broad. So it includes written material as well as visual representation. So we're not just investigating people who are taking pictures and videos, but people who are also writing stories. And this certainly plays a large part into how we deal with some of our repeat offenders who may think they are getting away with creating or pursuing this interest because they're writing a story rather than taking a picture or downloading pictures. And we've often pursued offenders who have engaged other offenders online in chat rooms and talked about child sexual abuse. The definition of child pornography here in Canada allows us to pursue charges against those people for that type of conduct. So the main kind of offenses we typically see the most, and we certainly lay the most here, is making child pornography available, possessing child pornography, and accessing child pornography. These are kind of straightforward charges. Possess, of course, is having it. Making available is sharing it with someone else, and accessing it is whenever you manipulate that file of child pornography you have, you move it from one place to another, open it up, that sort of thing. And making child pornography, unfortunately, we've had to lay quite a number of those charges here in Kingston, where we've caught individuals who've actually made their own child pornography because they've abused kids. So the child luring, again, I sort of touched upon this at the beginning. This is an offense that occurs via telecommunication. So whether it's text message or through some chat-based platform, your Instagrams, your Facebooks, Snapchat, that sort of thing, where someone's communicated with a child for the purpose of committing another offense. That other offense is quite often, they're making arrangements to sexually abuse that child, so meet them in person and harm them. Or they're trying to get that child to make child pornography, take pictures of themselves and then share it with the offender. So we, in our investigations, kind of take us usually wherever the newest, wherever you're going to find kids, whatever social media application kids are gravitating to these days, that's typically where we're going to find our offenders. They usually stay up to date with this sort of thing. So we'll find them on things like Snapchat and Instagram, Omegle, Kick, that sort of thing. But more often, Discord's a new one. Discord is a video game social media platform. It's for kids it's for people interested in video games to meet up, talk about games, and basically create teams. It's got a very kind of wholesome idea behind it. But unfortunately, because you have children there looking to play video games with other kids, you have offenders who pose online and want to talk to kids and engage them and offend against them. So in preparing for this presentation, I reached out to my colleagues within the RCMP at the National Child Exploitation Coordination Center, just to get an idea of the trends and what we're seeing in this type of offending. And as you can see, from 2017 to 2021, the total incidence of sexual violations against children in Canada, it's only increased every year. Back in 2017, we had 8,200 odd instances, and now we're up to 12,000. And the unfortunate reality is these type of crimes only continue to increase. Likewise, the total number of incidents of child pornography, it's kind of went up every year. And NCECC, as what we're sort of seeing too is it's playing catch up with the pandemic. Of course, with everyone being in lockdown at home, kids were on devices more. And so I would expect the 2022 numbers to be even higher, because we're seeing that we're getting more and more reports as the electronic service providers go through what they've seen online and report that to law enforcement. So it creates that extra burden on us as investigators with the number of files we're receiving and then what we have to action and triage. So I gathered some stats about the Kingston Police specifically, and this is the number of packages that we've received. So what I mean by package is when the RCMP gets a file, from the service provider, they get a report that was the service provider filled out, and they get the material, so the images or the videos that they managed to observe being exchanged or shared. And so from 2017, as you can see, our numbers have they've increased quite dramatically. At 2021, we got 60 files alone from the RCMP, and as of August 12th, we're up to 46 for this year. And that, just to remind you about how the ICE unit works, that's just files received from the RCMP. That's not files necessarily from citizens here in Kingston. So to kind of highlight that, so the total of investigations received by other sources over the last couple of years, we had 99, and that's from citizen complaints and cyber tip reports and referrals from other police agencies. Last year, 21, it was 70, and as of August 12th, we're at 48. So that's on top of the numbers sent from the RCMP. And we're also seeing, which is it makes Derek's job even harder, is when we do, so ultimately how our investigations work is once we determine where this offense is taking place, we do search warrants and we attend homes or businesses and we seize devices. And what we're seeing, the trend has been, is we're seizing more and more devices, which our analyst, my colleague here, Detective Frawley, has to process and analyze. We're seeing an increase in the number of devices seized, as well as the size and bytes of devices has only increased. You know, hard drives used to be really big things that could only hold a little amount of data. And now you can get a thumb drive that holds gigabytes and gigabytes worth of data. And it's not uncommon these days to come across people who have a hard drive that's capable of holding a terabyte worth of data. And of course, a terabyte worth of data, we're talking millions of images and videos. The storage space capability is it just goes up and up and up. And so us as investigators, you know, when we go through this material, we're finding that their collections, the number of images they have, only increase because their ability to store this data has only increased. And just some of our kind of recent achievements, we've had a lot of luck in the courts. We've got a lot of support from the Crown Attorney's Office here in Kingston, as well as we get a lot of support from, the provincial strategy itself, and the Ministry of the Attorney General has a couple of crowns assigned specifically to this area of expertise, who we talk to all the time. And out here in the East region, we have a crown from Ottawa who's assigned to us, who we get a lot of education and support from, and who's a big help in ensuring that these cases are successful at court. Recently, this year, we convicted an offender who we were fortunate to identify four children as a result of, and he was sentenced to 9 years. And then late last year, we convicted another offender and identified a child victim, and he was sentenced to 7 years. And since 2019, we've been able to identify 4 repeat offenders who've been arrested, charged, and I'm happy to say convicted. So we are thankful that we do see a lot of support from the courts, at least the Crown Attorney's Office, and we've had a lot of success in bringing these cases to a satisfactory conclusion. And that's, if anyone's got any questions, that's kind of that's the end of the PowerPoint. I know it's kind of a lot to take in.
Bridget, you had your hand up for a question.
Thanks. Jimmy actually had his hand up first. He's using his electronic hand. Sorry.
Oh, that's very nice of you. Okay, Jimmy, go ahead. You're on mute, Jimmy.
His Bluetooth might not be working.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. First, thank you very much for a great presentation. I have two questions. Actually, one question, but the two parts. The first part is, what is as the ICE unit, do we have any plan in place to send awareness and education to the young children who've been using or trying to use all of those apps we saw on it? I have two young children, so they are also using it. I wasn't aware of it, that what kind of things they can use and chat they can have it. Last year, we have an incident with my own son. They was chatting on the court or something, and they end up to just chat. It was no video, but there was inappropriate chat. So I found it and I went to the school and we talked and we resolved it. He was not involved. He found that he's not involved. Somebody else was there.
Mm-hmm.
So just want to know, as a unit, to make your job lesser or easier, I think it's a great idea to spread the awareness and educate the young children. So if you have any plan, if you please share with us. And also, what is the mandate, or what kind of mandate we have to determine the complaint come through is a real or is just somebody complaining about anything?
Okay, so to answer your first question, so last year we did a presentation for our entire service for our frontline in-service training, where we educated all our frontline officers about the apps we found that were currently being used to exploit children, and we provided them with the advice and training on how to deal with those calls when they receive them or when they're approached by citizens. As well as I've talked to the officers in our school resource officers, and I provide them with the education and certainly all the information they need to refer students to. The Canadian Centre for Child Protection has a great website that provides a tremendous amount of education for parents, not just kids who have unfortunately been victimized, but also for people who want to inform themselves about, hey, what should I be doing with my kids online to keep them safe? It's got all those tips and tricks on there. So we have taken those steps. It's something we've always been doing and we continue to do. I'm sure we'll be talking at next year's in-service training, keeping that up to date, keeping those officers up to date. And then, sorry, what was your second question again?
What is the plan or the mandate we have or the system we have to determine about the complaint, if it's legit or not?
Okay, so the files we received from the RCMP have already been vetted by an RCMP officer. So they've already made that determination that this is worthwhile and this is worth following up. And then the other files we receive, they're reviewed by myself and my colleagues, and we determine whether or not they are valid and worth following up. The unfortunate reality is the volume of calls we receive is so high that it's grim, but we triage them based on the severity of the images or the abuse that's occurring. And so that's kind of the mechanism that's in place for managing the intake of these files. We don't see a lot of false reports That was probably in like the maybe 1 to 2% of files we receive are false reports. Everything, because it's vetted already by like either an electronic service provider who saw something and said, this is child pornography. I think this is child pornography. And they've sent it to the Mounties, and the Mounties have then reviewed it and been, yes, that's child pornography. And this IP address is associated to Kingston. So I'm sending this to the Kingston police. And likewise, our frontline officers who take in reports, they've received training from us to know what to look for, and they can form an opinion. Okay, this is worthy of an investigation, and then it gets forwarded on to us.
And then if it's proactive, then obviously we know what we're dealing with. It's going to be legitimate.
Yeah, absolutely. Proactive work isn't done in areas where we think people might be talking about this stuff. No, we only do proactive work in areas where we know people are engaging in this type of offending. It's great questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And I think we may have lost Bridget. Bridget, are you there?
I've just texted her. We've had her. She's been off for about 2 to 3 minutes now.
Okay. Would anyone else like to ask a question to Paul? No, in that case.
Excuse me,
Harris,
Christian has his hand up.
Christian, thank you. Go ahead, Christian.
I mean, so this is a heinous crime, and it obviously has serious repercussions also for the people who investigate it. I can only imagine, I can't bear to imagine like what you also go through personally in terms of what as investigators. Can you give me a sense of like how you feel you're resourced to do this? That, relative to the extent of the challenge in Kingston, relative to sort of conversations you have with members sort of elsewhere, relative to sort of where this ranks as a priority sort of within the service, because it's probably a very large sort of a very large pit, and you're competing for resources internally, but we're also sort of your sense of how pervasive this problem is sort of in Kingston. Whatever you might be able to provide us here with some insights on that. And by resourcing, I don't just mean necessarily sort of your own staffing, but also the broader context within which you can carry out your work successfully in terms of both the investigations and your own ability to continue to sustain personally your involvement in these investigations.
Well, personally, I mean, I've always been part of strong teams in ICE units, and a teamwork approach has always been the best way of conquering having to deal with child sexual abuse material. It's always better to work with somebody when tackling this sort of thing. So thankfully, we have a team of 3 officers here at Kingston. So that's how we deal with those kind of safeguarding issues, is we look out for each other and we work together in order to move forward on that end. But in terms of resourcing, I don't know that there's a police service in the world that's staffed appropriately to deal with this problem. That I think an unfortunate reality is that, investigating crimes on the internet and dealing with devices is expensive. It's very expensive. Training costs a lot of money. Just keeping hardware up to date costs a lot of money. All the software, the forensic software, we're dealing with licensing every year, which costs a lot of money. Thankfully, the Kingston Police supports this program, and the Ontario, our provincial strategy supports this program, and we get funding from them, which helps us tackle this issue. But the reality is in a perfect world, we'd be able to staff this better, and we need the staff to deal with this. I was a member of the Toronto Police's Child Exploitation Unit, and I started there in that unit in 2012, and that 10 years later, they're at the same staffing levels, despite the thousands of reports that they get on a regular basis. The reality is, you'd have to dedicate a police department to doing this work to keep up with it. These reports, these investigations, a good one might take you 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. And when I say a good one, I mean one that doesn't have a lot of data and one that goes relatively smoothly from search warrant preparation to execution, arrest, and charges. But then other ones take months to complete. That one where the offender got a 9-year sentence, that took me months to finish that one investigation. And so you certainly constantly have a lot on your plate.
Going back with the support thing, each year too, we also see a psychiatrist or psychologist just to make sure our mental well-being is, we're able to handle what we're dealing with. Peer support's great, but I mean, that's also part of it too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bridget?
Apologies for that, I got kicked off. I just wanted to ask about repeat offenders. You mentioned that a couple of times. Is that an issue in this particular crime? And what's the approach then if we know that somebody's offended in the past?
Well, the approach really doesn't. So the first part, yes, it's an issue because unfortunately, this isn't the type of thing that we see a lot of people kind of get over and move on from once they've been found out and convicted. We've certainly been to conferences and training where we've learned that pedophilia is no longer identified as a mental health issue. It's a sexual preference, just like heterosexuality or homosexuality. So you can't expect these people to stop offending because it's almost hardwired into them, I'm sorry to say. So it certainly is an issue, but we don't change our tactics. Them being a repeat offender may, once they're identified during the course of our investigation, that might bump them up in terms of priority in order to put a stop to them since they are continuing to offend. But in terms of how we tackle it, it really doesn't come into play until that case is before the courts. That's certainly an aggravating consideration when they're being tried and ultimately when they're convicted.
Thanks for that. And yeah, I had a similar question to Jimmy, and that's around education. How much do we work? Like, is there more that the community can do, and including perhaps the school board and parent council to help educate children? And second to that is, do we use social media? Like now it's school time, people are getting back into school. Are we going to use social media to send out a reminder to parents to have these conversations with children?
I think that's a good idea to use social media. I mean, it's good to broadcast, again, the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. We can certainly make an effort to share that and make sure our media officers know to put that website out there, because I think it's a great resource. It stays current. And it provides all the tools they really need when it comes to whether they want to report an offense or they're just looking for advice on how to avoid pitfalls, all that stuff. It's an excellent resource. It's a great organization.
Yeah, I had 3 kids that went through the public school system and I never heard about them before. So I think for parents, that would be really appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, this is, it's unfortunate. It's not a topic that people like to talk about, right? It's kind of the darkest thing that we do. And I once spoke with a reporter about even why aren't these cases in the media more? And she was quite frank with me. She said, because they're disgusting and people don't want to read about this stuff because it's heartbreaking, right? Like it's very difficult to think that this is going on. Your neighbor's doing this, you know what I mean? This isn't the idea that this type of offending only occurs with that guy who's 40 plus years old living in his mom's basement. That's just not the reality. We're arresting people who are very successful, have professional jobs, have families, and this is just their dark secret.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I feel like we need more education to even be able to be aware of what to watch out for. And that's the kind of education that would be beneficial for our community and for all parents.
Sure, I agree.
Thanks.
Not only that, but I think hearing this last comment from Paul, it's really heartbreaking. All those adult people having a good job and families, might we should put a plan together as a force and as a community to educate them as well and let them know what they're going to lose. You know, if they don't get away from their dark secrets. It's dangerous. It's destroying not only them or the children involved in there, but also their families and friends. And it's bigger than that. Is our society. It's labeled our society, the society we are living in. It's really sad to hear that and see that people think that we are all human. We make mistakes, but I think we can help definitely each other to learn and get aware of it, and just like eye-opening, awakening. Oh, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Then I should stop that. But appreciate both of you for your time and presentation. Is heartbreaking.
Thank you.
It is very sad and dark. And, when you say it's like sexual preference, they're still sexual predators.
Oh, yeah.
So do you find that the courts give the maximum sentencing commonly, and what about the victims? Like, this is going to be throughout their lives, they're going to be victims. You can't just forget this stuff. Like, what do we as a community do for the victims?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the unfortunate reality is once the case is concluded in court, that kind of ends my involvement by and large. I do my best to make as many referrals as possible to make sure those kids are getting the help they need. But I don't know beyond that what ultimately happens with them, or what else is being done for them. I know that, our victim services here is great. The Boost program is great and gets kids in contact with the counseling and the help they need to deal with these. But ultimately, what happens with them and how they deal with them, that's up to the individual, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing with us today, your involvement in the services. And it's obviously very important. So on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for your time, and
Thank you.
care.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. I think my screen's frozen. No, cannot start video. Okay, well, you're just gonna have to have a blank screen today. Sorry about that. So we're gonna move forward. We're gonna talk about a disclosure of a conflict of interest. Anyone? No? Very good. Can I get approval of the agenda motion? Jeff? Jimmy, all in favor? Very good. Agenda's been approved. Can I get adoption of the minutes of meeting 22-10 held on July 21st, 2022 to be adopted? Jeff, Christian, all in favor? Thank you. I'm going to ask that the communications be received. Anyone? Thank you, Jeff. Bridget? Yep, all in favor? Very good. And then I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions with respect of any of the following communications from the Ministry of the Solicitor General, or the CAPG, or the Ontario Association of the Police Services Board. Is there any communications that you'd like to ask the chief or the deputy chief? No? Okay. Then delegations. I don't think there's any. I'm going to ask that the following reports be received for information purposes. Firster and a seconder. Yeah, Christian, Bridget, right on, all in favor. I know you're just fixing your hair there, Christian, but it looked like a hand. It was good. And then I'm going to ask the chief to speak on the budget report if she could.
Yes, we've got John Howes here who's going to present for you.
Thank you very much. Hi, John.
Hi. So this is for the 6 months ending on June 30th that we have. There weren't too many surprises here on our total net cost was 21.9 million against the budget of 21.3. We did have a deficit of 578,000. A couple of the big contributors, revenues were unfavorable by 292,000. The biggest thing there were the grants were off by we get from the governments. We were below budget about 200,000. A lot of those payments have been received. In fact, the end of July, we're close to $300,000 favorable on the grants. So we had some big payments come in from the CSPT grant and the CSP grant. So that was looking pretty good. The other items there, revenue checks, bike auction were unfavorable by 78,000. This is my segue into the bike auction. We have scheduled our next bike auction on October 15th at 9 a.m. at the Portsmouth Olympic Harbor, just in time for Christmas. That's my segue for that. Other than that, we've got some ups and downs there on revenues, but nothing material that I'm too worried about at this point in time. Going into operating expenses, total operating costs of 23.7 million against a budget of 23.4. We were unfavorable by 285,000. Few items in there. We know overtime is unfavorable by 259,000. And we've had a lot of different activities. We know the convoy in Ottawa, we spent 26,000, but we are getting additional cost recovery back to cover that. We know St. Patrick's was 83,000 unfavorable. We had 4 major instances there at the beginning of the year, a few homicides, and that always incurs some overtime, about 87,000 there. So we'll see where that goes. We may end up on the year unfavorable on overtime just because of the level of activity we've had there. Base wages were favorable by 246,000. We had a wage increase July 1st, so you'll see that added wages come in towards the end of the year. And because the budget's broken down evenly by month, we would expect to be favorable in the first 6 months on wages, knowing we've got this increase impacting us in the last half of the year. Part-time wages, they're tracking pretty good, $24,000 favorable. Of course, fringe benefits, like a broken record, were unfavorable, but a lot of the statutory benefits are paid up by the first half of the year, so we should see that swing towards the last half to some closer to favorable levels. So not too many surprises there. Supplies and materials were unfavorable by 33,000. As usual, contracted services, we have some big bills in the first half of the year that we pay that cover the whole year, so that should swing as we go. Insurance is unfavorable by 17K. We had quite a big increase in insurance in our budget last year. I think it was 10-12%, but those premiums are still dogging us, and we're seeing that unfavorable on that line. Education and training is favorable by 81,000. There's a lot of training starting up in the summer months, so we'll see some added costs ramping up as we go through the year on that line. Travel is favorable by 37,000. Again, with the pandemic, not a lot of travel. That's been reduced in the first 6 months. Investigative services, 25,000 unfavorable. We do have some major projects on the go, and you'll see some costs, I think, come in on that line as we head in the last half of the year. Utilities is favorable, 84,000. We're still looking at through that one. The bills were slow coming with the solar panels, so I think we'll see that swing more closer to budget in the last half of the year. The other biggie is fuel, 53,000 unfavorable. I obviously did not predict fuel prices being this high when we did the budget, so we will end up the year unfavorable on that line. So not a lot of surprises there. In fact, I can tell you, I was looking at July's numbers here, and we're starting to head back closer to break even at the end of July, which is expected, because then in the fall, we do have a lot of other projects pick up. So nothing there at this point that's too concerning, I don't think. Any questions from anybody?
Bridget, go ahead.
Thanks for your presentation. School is going back into session, and we're going to have lots of students coming to Queen's and St. Lawrence College again. And I just wonder if you, what kind of plan we have with Queen's. And I know there was an agreement that they are going to support some of the funds, but I'm just wondering if we're expecting a little if we're really ready for it, because you did also mention that we may end up in a deficit by the end of the year. We're not sure. Things are looking pretty good, but of course, Queen's homecoming and initiation week could change all of that. So I wonder if you could speak to them.
Angie, do you want to talk about Queens? You've been in the planning there, or the deputy, Scott?
Yeah, we're certainly in the process of already having meetings already with our community partners and within our own organization, getting the operational plan together, getting our staffing levels out, preparing people for that. And the move-in day is already booked with paid duty, and we've already planned for some, extra work on the weekends, as we always do. So we're keeping an eye on our intelligence level as to, numbers and so forth. So all that is happening as well. So in terms of, we're still with the Queen's Task Force on homecoming as well. So we're participating as that, as well as our other community partners are. So that's still working away in the background as well. Scott, anything else from your side?
No, I think you've covered it off exactly how I would have. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
And I hope things go to plan, so I'm not sitting here with a huge deficit at year end because of that. So
Excellent. We do too.
Very good. Thanks for your time there, John.
thank you.
So far, so good. Okay,
So far.
so far. Next, we're going to do motions. That the Kingston Police Services Board ratify a motion passed by a poll of quorum of board members on July 27th, 2022, pending the regular board meeting to endorse a provincial funding agreement between Her Majesty the Queen in right of Ontario as represented by the Solicitor General operating as Ontario Provincial Police and the Kingston Police with respect to the project Ontario Strategy to End Human Trafficking, ending on first day of April 2022 and expiring on March 31st, 2023. May I have first or seconder? Bridget, Christian, all in favor? Very good. My hand was up. Thank you. So that, and then B, that the Kingston Police Services Board waive fees in the amount of $500 for a duty officer at the Brother in Armed Veterans Motorcycle Club charity ride on August 27, 2022, with proceeds going towards Dawn House services and housing for women. May I have yeah, good, Bridget. Very good. Jimmy, all in favor? My hand is up. Thank you.
Just a discussion.
Yes,
Sure.
of course. Christian.
Just to ensure that the chief endorses that motion, I'm assuming it wouldn't be on the agenda if the chief wouldn't, but since, just to make sure the chief endorses that.
Yes, thank you for asking. I did double check with our paid duty staff that organizes this, and certainly this group has made some mitigating factors in terms of their run. And it's, they're going to be leaving in groups of 20 every 15 minutes, going to be obeying the rules of the road, traffic lights, all those kinds of things. So I think we're good to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And is there any new business for the meeting? No. Okay. Then I would ask that we move in camera. May I have a motion to do that? Christian, Bridget, all in favor? My hand is up. Very good. I'll suggest a 5-minute break. We'll reconvene, or say 7 minutes. We'll reconvene on the hour, 1 o'clock. Thank you.